Hi, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Marketing for Breakfast with R Cubed. I'm Martin Chilcott, and I'm your moderator for this morning. So as you can probably see from my camera, I've been around the block a few times with all sorts of companies, and I'm really interested to hear this morning what we've got from James Alty, founder of Apteco, who's going to take us through for about 20 minutes initially, all about how to best use first-party data.
Thank you, Martin. Good morning, everybody. I hope, like me, you've got your Marketing for Breakfast pack. I didn't actually open it before we started, so oh goodness me, it looks like tea time in there. So yeah, that's looking nice. Thank you very much to the guys. Yeah, I'm James. I'm the founder and MD of Apteco. We're a British software business. We produce the Apteco marketing platform, and I've spent 38 years working in data one way or another. So over the next few minutes, I'll cover a bit about what is first-party data and particularly your role in managing that data. I'm going to speak a little bit about marketing data, and obviously we're looking at customers and prospective and ex-customers in that data, but I'll also speak about anonymous data, and that may seem a bit anachronistic in terms of marketing, but I'll try and illustrate why that's now an important part of your first-party data. I'll talk about some ideas of analysis and how you can use analytics to help drive your organization's success, and we'll move on a bit to look at audience activation using first-party data. It's what 40 years ago Martin and I might have called campaign management, but nowadays it's definitely audience activation, and we'll look at how we can extend that audience activation into acquisition marketing using first-party data to drive patterns for lookalikes for acquisition. And I'll conclude with a few comments about AI. It is 2025. Everybody has to speak about AI, and I've got some thoughts on how AI will impact first-party data use. So what is first-party data? Well, it's everything your organization collects, everything that you retain. The first party is you, your organization, and it's the data that you own. And I will speak generally about customers, but what I talk of applies equally to supporters or donors or legators or patients or citizens, or whatever your phrase is for the identity of the person that you are dealing with. But first-party data also includes everything you know about your business activity, and particularly your business activity for marketing purposes with those customers. And that means everything you know about communications that have occurred in both directions, the comms you've sent, the responses you've gained, the inquiries that your organization has generated, and every type of transactional data that you can find and that you can link and that you can attach together. And I find a powerful way to think about this is that your first-party data is your organizational memory. It's the collated experience of everything your organization has done, whether it's good or bad, the learnings that you have made. And you, as the marketing teams, are often the primary custodians of a view of that data. Yes, the IT team might provide the technology, but it will very often be you guys that pull together the single customer view, the identity of the person, the customers, the prospects that you're dealing with. And you are custodians of that view. In a sense, you are custodians of the organization's memory. And that is a powerful position. As custodian of customer data, you're perhaps the most powerful data-driven team to communicate with your management team, with your board, with your colleagues, to deliver insight. Now, that first-party data will often be centered around your CRM systems, your data warehouse, your primary operational systems, whatever they may be. But you need to go and look for the data silos and the data systems that are around that core identity. Look for point of sale systems or contact center systems or production system or registration systems or event management systems in which data is collated and managed, and which you can start pulling into your scope to give a better understanding of your prospective and current customers. And that data will normally be pulled together somewhere in your organization. It may be a single customer view, it may be a customer data platform, it may be a customer experience platform, and boy, does the tech industry and the marketing industry love an acronym. You'll almost always find a 3-letter acronym floating around the industry, which is the current flavor of how to do that type of work. But it's important that you look at how you collate that data. And ideally, these days, you're looking for composable systems using APIs to connect together that data. Sure, if you've got data over there in Salesforce and data over there in Shopify, let's bring those together using the powerful APIs to allow you to manage that data. And the aim is to bring the data to your fingertips, to your team's fingertips, and so that you are agile and powerful in your use of the first-party data for your organization. Now, I mentioned anonymous data, and it may seem at odds with identifying customers, but actually nowadays it's a really important and increasingly important part of the first-party data mix, understanding the anonymous interactions with your organization. And so extend what you look for from customer identity, name and address, email address, whatever, into device IDs, mobile advertising IDs, connected TV IDs. What can you find, demand side platform IDs, what can you find that allow you to bring data together around those anonymous interactions? And I have a challenge for you. Stop and think for a minute whether you really need a person's name in order to make a compelling proposition for your organization's activity. Could you do it to a device? Could you make that message available on a device? Could you advertise to that device, knowing its previous behavior, reflecting on that behavior and using that to target that device? In time, of course, we hope that person will subscribe, donate, buy, and identify themselves in whatever way your organization does. And at that point, identity resolution, you'll connect those identities together. But it's a challenge. Think about anonymous. And we know businesses now that are focused on collecting device IDs in order to serve that anonymous market, in order to market to them using all the same techniques, recency, frequency, value, which I'll speak of in a minute. You can do, well, certainly recency and frequency you can do on device interactions. You may not have a value yet. So once you've collated data, once you've understood the sources of data around your organization, you've got a first-party data store, you're going to move into some forms of marketing analysis. That's the role that first-party data powers. And you'll start with the insights and reporting needed for your organization. And that might be driven by product launches, projects, regional activity, expansion or changes. But you'll start sharing those insights, however you make them. My challenge to you is, can you automate those insights? Don't leave your team using a knife and fork to put that data together in a spreadsheet every week. It's deadly. It just burns people out. So look at how you can automate the value in those insights, automate the insights that are valuable, and make sure you don't overwhelm your recipients. We've all heard the stories of departments that produce reports that no one reads. They just become background wallpaper. You get the email every day, it's got the report attached. So what? I've just got 1,000 other things that are going to come before that. So data needs to drive the highlights, and make sure you highlight the interesting, the exceptional, the trends, the targets, the hits, the misses, the alerts that you can diagnose from your first party data. Don't just produce a report because you've always produced it. Find the top right-hand corner of that report that's got the interesting bit in it. Shed the rest. Just show your management team the bit that has got the high values or the alert or the problem in it. And that's all about data democratization, a phrase that, you know, we've all heard over the last 5 years or 10 years, whatever, sharing that data, getting it out. And as custodians of the first party data for marketing, you've got a view, you can do something useful with that. And that will normally lead from insight reports, analytic reports, into discussions about the concepts of how you classify your marketplace and your customer base. And there are many standard classification and segmentation schemes, you know, recency, frequency, value, sometimes called recency, frequency, monetary, or, you know, churn models, or lifetime value models, or banded segments for you know, recency of activity combined with product sector. There's lots of different ways that you can slice that data. And once you start applying segments, once you start creating those segments on your first party data, you can start looking at how people or businesses move from segment to segment. What is the motivation for that? What's the driver for that? Why are they engaging more or less with you now? Can you alert when someone drops out of your loyal customer segment into an ad hoc customer segment? Let's go do something with marketing on those people. And so that's why transactional data is super powerful as part of your first party data. It's not just the contact details, it's all the patterns that you can find around those people. And then maybe start assigning personas on the basis of those migrations between segments and the analytics that you are doing. Do you have a way that your organization already thinks of personas in your marketing activity? Did you think of those for content, and how can you apply those on your data? How can you find the behavioral activity, the transactional activity that fits those personas? Can you improve the personas, and then can you use those for your audience activation activity, what we previously would have called campaign management? And we all know that we aspire to send the right message at the right time through the right channel, but you can extend that in n degrees further. You know, the right ask if you're a charity, the right offer if you're selling or subscribing, the right response mechanism, the right brand, the right color, the right textual content. It really comes down to personalization around your segments, your personas, and the transactional activity in your first party data. And full personalization, I think you can aspire to make every communication feel like it was handwritten for that recipient. And that takes real effort. It's you know, hyper personalization, if you like. And that means you will need to prepare a lot of marketing resource variation. Your data will drive that, but you need the imagery, you need the brand selection, you need the offer points, the discount codes, the vouchers, the phraseology that you would use that differs for a loyal long-term customer from a new customer, for example. So that needs efficiency in your team, and efficiency in how the data can drive those channels to use that content. And ideally, you will reuse content in different channels. Now, there are lots of formats. You know, if you're doing a meta ad, the format of the graphic is different than if you're sending an email, is different if you're doing something on a push notification, for example. So there is some variation, and I'll come on later to AI, but I think that is one of the places where we can help with that production sort of work. And then, as we're using first-party data for audience activation, make sure you're thinking always about the basis of the communication. Make sure you're thinking, is this a contractual communication? Am I using legitimate interest? Have I gained consent? You know, how are we 7 years down the line? I think almost, within a month of 7 years of GDPR, how are we compliant? What are we doing with our first-party data? And as you start working the identity resolution as anonymous devices become linked to identified individuals, how will you ensure that you are collecting the appropriate permissions. You don't want to look like you're stalking people, do you? You don't want to be spooky and, you know, pop out the woodwork and they start thinking, well, hang on, are you listening to my microphone? You know, the classic sort of scare of the tech industry. So, you know, every communication needs to have really upfront the permissions, the privacy, your stance, why you're communicating with those people. And there's loads of good practice around the industry. We all see it as consumers or business contacts, but you know, make sure the privacy center is upfront. You probably see some bad examples as well, but you know, make sure your privacy center is upfront across multi-channel, and so people can say, actually, I don't want you in my WhatsApp. I'd rather you email me. Easy, you know, let's respect that until they tell us differently. Now, I mentioned that we can look at using first-party data, the data you already know, you've already collected, that you already own, and we can use that for acquisition. And it's a fairly simple technique. You can use the characteristics of your current profitable, engaged customers, because you can select those, you can identify those in your first party data, and you can upload that to an ad tech platform, whether it's a social or a demand side platform or you know, any other ad solution, you know, streaming service or something. You can upload that set of data, and most of those platforms offer some form of lookalike. It's in their interest to do so. Whether they call it expand or lookalike or profile, doesn't matter. They will have a technique where they can use their data attached to the records you upload, and only a proportion of them will match. And some of them do that matching remarkably slowly, but they will do it. And you can then target. And so, you know, if you upload to Meta and, you know, target on Facebook or Instagram, assuming they haven't been broken up by the Federal Trade Commission, or Google or X or LinkedIn, if you're in a B2B scenario, you can use those lookalikes, the organization contacts or the consumers that look alike your first party data, to go and serve ads. And of course, those ads can run with UTM tracking codes that will bring them back to your site, where you can classify that campaign, you can classify that data. One fundamental: whenever you're using data like that, you actually need to upload two first-party data lists. The first one is your target group, the people that you want to find those characteristics. But the second one is your stop list, everybody that you already know. You don't want to pay Meta a cent for serving ads to customers that you already know about. And those platforms support stop lists as readily as they support target lists. So make sure you use the full extent of your first party data to put a stop. You want them to go and find others, not the people you already know about. And then just to finish on our topics today, just a little bit about AI. AI, as I mentioned, already well known in the marketing sector for content creation, you know, making images, refining text, rewriting paragraphs. And as I alluded to, I think that will be helpful in production efficiency. You know, you need your team working efficiently. But I'm interested today in how AI can help with data. And we think about it in three tiers. The first tier is knowledge that the large language models have already of marketing techniques, of the capabilities of platforms, the sort of innate knowledge of what you can do. And they're ideal for that. You can ask questions in all sorts of ways. You can request it do something for you in all sorts of language. That's fine. But the challenge is, how do we then bring knowledge of data? And we've been researching how to split what the large language model is best at, the generative AI is best at, from what the numeric, analytic, logical, and data engines are best at. Because there's absolutely no reason and no benefit in asking a large language model to do sums for you. Yeah, it'll do simple stuff, but you know, don't try and give it a million rows and say, what's the profile of these customers? It's just an inefficient way of working. So find how to split what you know about your data from what your AI knows about the industry, and how can you teach your AI about your data characteristics. Prompt engineering, as we've all heard, and the context that you provide to your AI can come from your data. And clearly that all becomes most valuable when you bring those things together. Knowledge of the techniques and the platforms and the capabilities with the context of your data, the understanding of your data, and then the ability to drive something. You can imagine really in the short term, through a conversation or even a speech interface, saying, please create me an audience of loyal customers who've not bought in the last month. That's how the young people joining your teams will be able to work with your data. And once they've created that audience, or the AI has created that audience, and you've done some validation, then you could say, please create me a campaign with this audience to launch my new product XYZ. And I'd like it to be an email campaign, and I'd like you to do variations by region, for example. And there are systems that can do that already. They're out there. You could even expect your colleagues to be able to ask the AI, is my new campaign profitable? It's run for a week. How's it going? Tell me about it. What's the characteristics of the people who are responding to my new campaign? And if you think data has been a bit locked away, I feel really lucky that I chose to do a computation degree in Manchester all those years ago, and I learned about data, and I learned about systems. My first job was dealing with data, and it's given me a career where I can access so much insight, and I have technical skills to do it, but not everyone has that training, not everyone has that skills, and AI is going to really significantly change the access to that sort of insight. It won't need technically skilled people to do that. You'll have AIs that are able to do it for you. Do, of course, think about where your first party data is going. There are some AI systems where you're uploading a lot of data, and I think you can and should be clear, whether it's OpenAI, ChatGPT, Copilot, whatever, you should be clear where your data is going. You need to be able to make a statement to your management team about what you're doing with the first party data, where it's going. And right now, and for some months, possibly longer, you need to think of the AI like an intern. Super enthusiastic, very helpful, always there, but sometimes gets things wrong. We all know that the hallucination and the confidence with which an AI gives you an answer, but have you actually looked behind? Is that right? Is that actually what our data shows? So let's be careful with that. So just to summarize, we've talked about first party data as your organizational memory, considering yourself in a powerful, privileged role as custodian of the customer data. That your role in the organization is possibly unique as the one team that can tell the whole organization what's going on, because you're pulling data together for marketing purposes. You're also able to share that, and you can use the analytics and the insights you generate from that privileged view as you democratize access to insight, using segments, using personas, using analytics to drive your activation through your campaigning. You're sharing that with your colleagues. And as we've touched on, you can extend your marketing scope to anonymous data and to acquisition through lookalikes in a variety of platforms. And we touched at the end on using AI to help you with techniques, with data, and with creating resources. So, Martin, I think I've used my time. Let's open it up and see how people are doing with their first party data.
Excellent. Thanks very much, James. I thoroughly enjoyed that, I have to say. And as you point out, a few years ago, to hear recency, frequency, value again, was one of the first things I learned in marketing 40 years ago, because that's how things tend to work. But equally, I'm really intrigued by the use of, you talked about the democratization of data and the role that AI can play. Could I just ask a question? How important, it's a bit of a loaded question, how important is it to get the question relevant for AI? Because I've seen a lot of stuff where people ask a question, get an answer, and they say, well, hang on a minute, what question did you really ask that AI tool?
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely right. It is a logic question. You've got to ask the right question and understand the AI will answer it only with the context that you've built or given it. And when you come to data, it's just the same. You know, we see lots of examples of people doing good analytics, but with some skewed basis of what they are looking at. So whether it's AI or your team, you know, just be careful that you really understand how you've selected. Is it a random sample? Are you able to project from this group onto another group, or have you in some way picked a skewed sample? And Martin, to add to your memories of RFE, let me add control groups, because every marketing process, you've got to have control in there. Control allows us to see what would have happened anyway. Those are the people either in a quiet cohort or excluded from a particular message or campaign that you measure against. And it's only when you have a control that you can actually claim a success or identify that you've got a problem. And, you know, a control group doesn't need to be huge, but it needs to be there in order to validate your activity.
Absolutely.
And we better go and teach AI about that, eh?
Right. Thank you very much, James. And well, I think we're opening up for questions. So if you'd like to raise your hand, and I'll try and spot you. Who'd like to chip in? I'm going to put you on large gallery, see if that helps me. There we go. Who have we got?
Sally has her hand up.
Oh, Sally, yes.
I do. Thanks, James. That was a great presentation and really insightful. Just on the AI point, are there any kind of AI providers, platforms, however you want to call them, that you would kind of recommend to dip your toe into that kind of activity?
Well, good question. We've not tried to measure them all. We are researching with OpenAI ChatGPT 4.0 Mini, and it is fantastic and cost effective. Our experience of that has been really good. But DeepMind came along and we all thought, oh, yeah, better go and look at that. And you know, we didn't actually find that we could gain any benefit of that. We are coming at it from a slightly different perspective, Sally, because we are, you know, tech providers, tech developers. We're looking at infrastructure, security, scalability, privacy of the platform, and we've come to a happy structure using Azure implementations. Obviously, Microsoft, a big investor in OpenAI, so we're using Azure isolated instances that we know no other system, the training, nothing else comes from that system. So we can guarantee that is isolated and nothing is being learned from the data and the questions that are submitted to it by Apteco. So to that extent, I'd validate it, but we've not tried to measure all the other systems. So I don't think I'm qualified to pick one out of many. For you. And for sure they will keep evolving, and you know, it's an arms race, isn't it? Who's got the biggest data center, who's got the best researchers, who's got the engineering to produce these systems?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you though.
Thanks, James. Who else would like to chip in? I'm trying to keep a track of Andy. Louis. Oh, Lou.
Hi everyone. Yeah, it's just so I've recently joined Cambridge and Counties Bank, as Martin said, and having sort of worked particularly with Martin and Andy across lots of financial services companies and retail, where data was a really key part of it, and sort of CRM systems were fairly advanced. I've come into Cambridge and Counties and it's a real shock. So they're only 13 years old. So you'd imagine their data processing and their systems would be really advanced. And actually, they're not. They're you know, at the moment working on individual spreadsheets, each salesperson, you know, it's a horror show. And so what I'm keen to do is to show how data, I need to take them on a journey, really, that, as you mentioned at the beginning, is sort of, you know, those real key highlights. Because I think it's been built as a very sort of sales driven organization. So it's, you know, lots of sales guys with their own individual work lists, spreadsheets. And what I need to do now is sort of really get in there with a few nuggets as to what are the benefits of first party data and what can it be used for other than just that short-term sale. And we are in that place with the sort of short-term sale where they haven't actually captured all of the not only consents but contact information. It's very much, you know, I'll get that deal done and do it in the quickest way. So I need to take them on a big learning exercise, which is fun. But
I've got a nice example for you, Louise, on the challenge of that data collection. We have a client which is a tyre depot, and you can imagine, you know, a motorist rocks up, a guy who's been changing a wheel comes to the front desk and says, "Hi, how can I help you?" Very polite and service oriented, very, very good. And you know, the transaction is, I need some tyres, whatever. That guy who's got dirty gloves on, you know, is not naturally motivated to collect clean data until the organization changed their rewards to reflect data. You know, they said to those guys, if you collect clean data, we recognize the value centrally and we'll share that value with you. I don't know how they did it exactly, but there was a motive. And bingo, they now have got a loyal customer base, so they're able to communicate on recurring interactions. You know, we sold you some tyres 9 months ago. Would you like to start thinking about the winter? Whatever. You know, do you need an MOT? All those sort of things. But it started with the guys with the dirty hands, with the gloves, and a computer terminal on the reception desk, and, you know, upgrading that value perception so that, as well as great service on the, you know, the brakes and rubber, it was data as well, and it changed their business.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because that's we had that similar challenge at the Derbyshire Building Society where I was with Andy, and Martin and I and Nick Honey did exactly that in terms of it, you know, that incentivized piece. So it's interesting. Yeah, I guess, yeah, it's the same old rules apply, isn't it? So yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you.
I'm going to come to James in a moment. Just about tyre companies, a question, a bit of data with a guy who's got grease on his is how many miles do you do a year then, roughly? Oh, about 10, 11,000. I now know how quickly your tyres run out.
Yeah,
they wear out. Therefore, I can target you and say, you know, ahead of time. So it's that anticipatory, but it's a sort of conversational thing that people would ask. James, you've had your hand up for a bit.
Yeah, thanks. It was just a question on whether you think at some point you get too granular with kind of I suppose the question is, we have 28 businesses here, one single customer view, and on the face of it, I suspect if you looked at our data, every one of those businesses has the same customer, and so you're continuing to dig and to find the unique points, and even to the point of a single business area will have a really loyal customer who's been coming for 20 years, and the sort of one and dones. It's a destination, a once in a lifetime destination, and those people on the face of it look the same. Obviously they're not, but is there a danger, in your opinion, of sort of digging too deep, that actually, you know, you're becoming too granular with the data? Or is that, you know, the deeper you go, the better you'll kind of get, specifically for kind of acquisition purposes?
Yeah, personally, I would keep digging. I mean, it doesn't sound like good advice in life, does it? But yeah, keep digging the data. I mean, you have got the most fantastic challenge with the mix of brands, but a consolidated central identity. And you, as we recognised last year, have done fantastic work on how to manage that communication, how to prioritise the communication. You know, if somebody is really engaged with brand one, why are you talking to them about everything else that is going on? And I think much of what I spoke of with the efficiency of the personalization, the multi-way variation that you will be dealing with, it's a real production challenge, but it doesn't half make a difference to the recipients. Whether you're interested in dogs or airplanes or horses or stately hounds or whatever. Let's speak about the thing that persona respects and values, and let's make that communication appropriate to them. And not many of the people on this session will have that spread of diversity that you guys cope with, but each of us can recognize it. I speak to our marketing team about recognizing the difference between the people who are licensing certain bundles from us, the difference between an end customer and a partner relationship, a distributor relationship, and we try to customize what we do. So it for all of us to work on that segmentation and personas to talk to them. So yeah, from what I know of what you guys have done, I think you're doing really well, but I wouldn't be scared of digging deeper.
Great, thanks.
I think it comes back to also, James, the brand you mentioned there, the brand that a customer is engaged with or a prospect engaged with. There's a reason for that, and therefore to try and it actually sort of can water it down by saying, oh, by the way, we've also got this, and this. They've actually come to you for a reason. We think about brands all the time. Customers and people don't. And therefore we might over intellectualize the opportunity, but just stick with what's the thing that they've bought into, what's the idea that they've connected with.
Yeah, certainly start there, and there will be cross-selling opportunities.
Yeah.
We're not going to pigeonhole people in a segment that is one way forever. That would be daft. And your control group will help you identify where there are other opportunities. There's a danger of analytics becoming regressive, that you're kind of focusing in on a model of the thing that is the segment that you started with, and you end up falling down to a very sort of one-dimensional view. I don't do that. Let's make sure we're bringing fresh blood into the communications and doing that in a controlled manner with your first-party data, and recognizing people's engagement and consent and interactions, but opening their eyes to the other opportunities.
Yep, brilliant. Andy, you've had your hand up for a bit.
Yeah, I had a couple of points really, which was lots of organizations we talk to will obsess about the tools at the end, right, without first going all the way back and getting that data foundation right and getting to grips with first party data. And that sort of, that's quite frustrating because, shit in, shit out. Let's be blunt. So the other point I wanted to make was around anonymous, James, because I think that's going to be crucial, especially for some sectors. Back in my national lottery days, there was a huge audience of anonymous who would just hit the digital estate, either the app or the website, just to check results, right? They would buy in retail because they wanted the physical pig ticket, but they would use digital channels to kind of check results. And that was a huge opportunity, right? So I'd like to talk a little bit more about anonymous users. And once you are tracking and stitching behavior to a device ID, what you then kind of carry on and do with that.
Yeah, and just to use the illustration you've spoken of, and I'm not familiar with the detail of that, looking at the pattern of interactions, how frequently they're hitting from that device, how recently they've hit from that device, what the interaction is you can create a segment just from that. I have a segment of people who visit every Saturday evening. That brilliant. We can talk to them differently than the people who come along, once every 3 months when there's a special rollover. And that personalization already will start making a difference to them. And that's no clever technology. That is simply one device, multiple visits. Bingo. We're starting to build a pattern, and then you can layer more on top of that as in your app or through the digital wallet. You can go talk to them. I mean, actually, I realise I didn't speak of it, but one of the techniques that I like is if you get a loyalty card. So if you're in retail and you do a loyalty card, put it in a digital wallet. Do you know you can message to that loyalty card in the wallet if there is a change that's relevant for the loyalty? You can't use it for general promotional stuff, but it's another contact point. You can go through the digital wallet, talk to somebody through their supporter card, retail card, whatever it is. So there's lots of digital contact points that you can engage with, and then start looking at the patterns of activity, and then promote back to them.
Okay.
And just out of interest, in fact, maybe this is one for Martin. We could get people to put their hands up if they're doing anything with anonymous data. I mean, how many people are actually using anonymous data at all at the moment? In fact, let's phrase it another way. Yeah, there's 2 people.
Yeah.
Can you describe what you're doing, without breaching any confidences? Can you describe what you're doing?
Yeah,
you're on mute, John. You're on mute, John.
I'll jump in then. Just
Please.
to say, in terms of how we are targeting using it, it's more that we have identified it as an area of the database that we need to be focusing on more. And so we have that kind of the anonymous data, or the where we actually don't have personal details on them. Let's say we've got device details, or we know the IP address. We're focusing in on that as an area that we need to explore further. So sort of our data and insights team are becoming far more knowledgeable on that.
Certainly, once
John,
you've got, because I care for speak. Certainly, if you've got Telium IDs and you're matching those also across multiple devices, you can start to build what we call a user level data store, which is that anonymized data store, but key data points of what product, what time, what they're interacting with. So when they come back through something like Permutive, you can advertise back out to those segments, and you can actually start to personalize the experience, although you don't know who they are yet. And then what's often common as well is, as and when they identify themselves using some other GA tagging or registration that matches the Telium ID, then your user level data mart is a mix of people you don't know and people you do know. And ultimately, then you've got to mix the two. And then ultimately, one of the objectives of the commercial team is to convert as many don't knows into do knows, because they know they can increase the advertising yield against an account by about 10-fold if they know who the person is and can accurately more better target them.
Lovely, Robin. That is great, and an illustration of commercial benefits, but also the challenge of getting teams working together. If you've got an ad team that is in their little silo thing, their thing, we got the retention marketing team over there and their silo thinking their thing. Let's try and break those down. Let's get that data connected, see what we can do to get a complete picture. And as Robbie alludes to, there are services out there that have the identity graph that can connect identities of different types to help you then resolve who this is, who that device is operated by within your permissions. And I think we're going to see more work on that data, and it's huge. Billions and billions of records and devices and interactions going on. That there's a challenge then to handle.
John, you were going to add something, yeah.
Yeah, I can just give the example of how we use it in a number of ways. But obviously, one of the core objectives of any online business is acquisition. And we have a lot, and Andy mentioned this, we have a lot of anonymous people using our various digital assets. Some of them may already be registered, but we can start to profile those players and what they're doing, maybe they're results checking, what lines are they looking at. So we can start to profile even our anonymous users, and then we can use that data to offer. So with acquisition, obviously, we get a lot of organic acquisition coming through those channels. So we don't necessarily want to incentivize them with promotions to customers who are going to register anyway and cannibalize that. So using those profile of anonymous players, we can then offer targeted personalization on the landing pages, on the results pages, to then bring them into the registration funnel. So yeah, it's a simple way that we build up that profile and then act on it and drive those outcomes.
But the key is that you've got to get your in-session personalization going, right? You can't rely on outbound.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so we've worked with the Telium IDs, as Robbie mentioned. We use our own trackers and then tie those through to the personalization engines. But as you said, it's not the tools; it's making sure you've got the data layer to actually capture those IDs, capture what they're doing on those pages to build those profiles, and then being able to activate it. But yeah, it's all good stuff.
Craig, you had your hand up a moment ago.
Thanks, Martin. James, you mentioned about sort of compliance and permissions, and that this is an area that's quite close to my heart. You know, we're in an age where there's never been so much data. We've never had so many tools, and there's so much democratization within a company that marketeers have access to data and they can do their own thing. And I think my concern, I'm interested in other people's opinions on this, is about control. And there's two examples of this. Every third email I get into my email box, my personal email, is, oops, sorry, we made a mistake. Here's our email again. Oh, we forgot the discount code. Oh, I got the dates wrong. Because somebody's thought, I can do this, I can grab, oh, I've made a mistake, never mind, I'll do it again. Because email's free, everybody knows that, no harm done. You know, that's not true, but that's the perception. And equally to your point about privacy policies and permissions, when we onboard new clients, I always look at their privacy policies because we need to make sure it's in shape. And we had one, I looked at it, and there was a statement in there, and they thought they were doing the right thing to say, we will never share your data with anyone outside of our organisation, which is great if you're never using a printer or an ESP or us or Facebook or anything else. But as it was, we couldn't do a thing with their data, so we had to get that changed and had to advise the customers of that. And I just wonder whether everyone in this call feels they're close enough to knowing their own privacy policy or compliance to have faith that they're doing the right thing, because obviously the consequences of sending things out when you shouldn't be are not insignificant.
That's a very loaded question, Craig, because we've got a lovely team that look after that sort of stuff, so I don't have to worry about it. But clearly I should actually know it in a lot more detail. So yeah, I think it might be the answer to that is obviously you should understand your privacy policy and the consequences of what's in there, but it's very easy to farm that out to somebody else because you don't have the time or inclination to know it inside out.
Yeah, it's not actually not that difficult. I mean, if I can do it, then anybody on this call can do it. But yeah, if you can't, then employ someone to give me a call and employ me to have a look at it for you.
Actually, let me ask you a question for everybody. Just in personal experience, you know, what proportion of GDP, what proportion of people who speak to you as a customer or prospect do you think are adhering to the best principles of GDPR? Because I see examples all the time where even simple things are not being done properly. Yeah,
I mean, in terms of people who are doing it absolutely right, it's somewhere between 0 and 0%. I think there's sort of 20% of people who are doing it pretty well and won't have any major problems. Bearing in mind, compliance is risk-based. People have to make complaints to the ICO really for anything to happen to it. But there's room for improvement in everybody's policy.
Yeah, and sometimes in very big brands, actually. I won't mention the airline because my son-in-law is a captain flying with them. So, but I'm amazed about how they don't seem to comply with it. But coming back to it, I'm interested in the anonymous data, James, but also just this is a more general question, because it often has come up over the last years of clients that I've dealt with, which is, have we got a retention problem or have we got an acquisition problem? So coming right back to it, I remember doing having a client who said, and they just said, we want you to design a loyalty program for us. And they were kind of a little bit upset when we came back and said, you don't need one. They said, but that's what we asked you to come up with. We said, yeah, but you don't need one. But actually, it's the customers you're acquiring, and your marketing activity for the last 2 or 3 years has generated customers who are just going to come in, get an offer and bugger off again. So is that something which people are sort of have a clear on or thinking about, and how first party data can help you understand that?
And you addressed the question to me, so I'll start. I mean, that is a classic of analytics. You know, I mean, I imagine what you did whenever that project was sit down, look at the data, look at the patterns, look at the behaviour, start looking at the aggregates that you could prepare, and understand how the behaviour of new customers was different from behaviour of loyal customers. And remember, every single customer is on their own journey, but they all start at different points in time. You know, you do a lovely campaign, you're going to launch something, you start getting interactions with lots of different people. Each of them is on that journey, and you can reference them back to when did they place their first inquiry, when did they place their first order, when did they engage. Each of those behaviours will have different timing gaps between them, and you know, you might be pulling data from multiple systems, but if that data has common elements, one of those common elements will be date and time. You know, when did this happen? Bringing that together, as I said, so that you as custodian of the first party data can see the big picture. You know, this person, you know, engaged 3 times with us digitally, but then they were talking to the contact center. Contact center, you know, knew a little bit about them, but saw it in isolation. You've got the picture. You can see what is that customer's journey to date. What can I do to react, to influence, to respect their choices? So analysis, you know, that's it. Whether it's anonymous, you know, have I got device IDs that you know, are never returning? Have I got, you know, what proportion of them come back repeatedly within a time? You know, device IDs are a little bit more tricky because they're a transient thing, and you know, people are interacting on whatever device happens to be in their hand at that point. So it's a challenge to get the full picture. But you know, you can be looking at that analysis to understand what's the characteristics that are changing in my customer base.
Yep. Nicola, you've got your hand up.
Hi, yeah, I couldn't help jump in when the topic of loyalty programs came up, because that's very much my bag. But I think it's an interesting example that you gave of saying a brand doesn't need a loyalty program. What they need is to sort of acquire better quality customers, because I sort of think that the two go hand in hand. It's rare that I'm not an advocate for a loyalty program, but for me, I think it's all about how you do it. And actually, a loyalty program might not be an explicit sort of proposition of do more, get more, you know, in a sort of customer facing way. But usually, if you are rewarding first transaction exponentially more than future transactions, in a sense, you need a similar approach in terms of a customer loyalty mentality in order to change how that acquisition strategy goes. I think in my experience, there is far too much emphasis, importance, budget allocated to acquisition and not enough to retention. And I think, unfortunately, combination of kind of lots of CMOs coming from backgrounds where things like performance marketing are quite sort of prevalent. I think it's sort of a metric that they know and understand well. And similarly, sort of finance departments seem to know and understand a lot of those kind of metrics a lot better than they understand retention metrics. But I think there's usually just a focus on buying more customers, as is usually the case when, you know, they're acquired through those channels. And as well as being sort of terrible strategically, it's usually not very sort of helpful in the long term, because as you say, you just get a load of customers that will come in for an offer, you know, an introductory offer and leave. And actually, it's a sort of a truth universally acknowledged that it's a lot cheaper to keep your good customers than it is to buy new ones and acquire new ones, whether that's essentially buying them through performance marketing, or if it's, you know, through the more traditional means of kind of building brand awareness and kind of bringing them in a more traditional organic way. Generally, that's a hell of a lot more expensive than just keeping customers that you already have. And their purchase intent is there, and they're engaged with your brand already to some degree. But I think there's just usually the wrong focus in terms of retention versus acquisition as an entire sort of marketing strategy, and in terms of the way budgets are allocated. So I would love to see more of a shift in terms of understanding the role of retention and of recognizing kind of longer term customer value and sort of rewarding that a lot better. But unfortunately, I think we're quite a long way away from that being the norm.
Yeah, James, I think that you and I will both be in a position. We've moved on a long way from marketing budgets are getting about attracting new customers. And if we've got any money left over, we might do something at the back end. And who looks after that? Oh, that customer retention manager. Well, actually, it's storing up problems for that manager a couple of years down the road. When, you know, how's that retention going? Oh, he's doing a terrible job. She's all over the place on that one, you know. And we've moved on from them, but there's still this aspect of acquisition here, retention here. Maybe talk about your experience with, it's the actual CMO you've got to get to be able to demonstrate the capability of what you can provide through first data leverage, if you.
Yeah, absolutely right. And, you know, analytics across the lot, understanding across the lot the you know, behavioral modeling, so that you understand those segments that I spoke of. And it comes down to simplifying these things so that other teams around the business understand what marketing are doing. You know, you are charged, we are charged with investing a part of the organization's budget in the marketplace. You know, that's what we're doing. We use that data to swing the odds in our favor, to make a better outcome from our marketing bets. We are trying to find the best way to use that organization's budget. And if we are accurate and diligent and careful and organized and automated, we can spend that money really effectively and help the organization succeed. And if we're a bit more casual with it, well, we don't get the great results, we don't get the growth, we don't get the budget, and, you know, things are less good. So, you know, that's what I meant about treasure the importance of your role with first party data. You know, it's key to your organization's success. If you guys are really good with data, then your organization has got a great foundation and a great chance of succeeding. You can maximize that chance. So I think, you know, we know how marketing teams are sometimes perceived as doing the fluffy stuff. That's not it. The marketing team now is data. You know, first party data is absolutely crucial. So, you know, go celebrate. Let's use it well.
Right. I love that expression you used of swing the odds in our favor, because a lot of people talk about data as, oh, so we're going to get exactly what. No. We're swinging the odds in our favor across the organization in all sorts of ways. Yeah. Robbie, do you want to come in again?
So what I was going to slightly reflect in here is there's also the dichotomy between acquisition and retention. If acquisition do such an amazing job, you're going to get people you can never retain, and basically you burn. You know, if you've got good analytics on board and you can get down to CPAs and engagement costs and lifetime value, then there's a business case to start adjust. But equally, I think it's important in an organization to have as low a level as possible where acquisition and retention report to the same lead, like a net growth director, so someone can actually say, sorry guys, you've got to dial this down because we can't keep these people. There's got to be a sensible balance in here. And I think otherwise organizations can very quickly run out of headroom in the sector where they've burnt everyone that was ever going to be associated with their product. And then where do they go to find new people? And that's really difficult for organizations to manage.
Yep. Karen, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I've said this before in it, but and it was just something that came to me then when people were discussing this subject. But I remember chatting to a guy from Paddy Power once who told me, and I can't remember how long it was after somebody had signed in or registered with Paddy Power, how quickly they knew what their lifetime value was going to be. But it was literally 24 hours. Because based on what behavior, what transactions that person does after registering, they can then put them, they understand their customer journeys and values so well, they can tell what route that person's going to go on and then take whatever retention, let's say, or early new customer actions they need to do to put that person onto that profitable route. Or actually, if they know that they are a lookalike that is never going to make them money, then they won't invest that marketing effort in them. It was fascinating. I was absolutely stunned by the speed that they know that from their data from those early transactions.
So it's not at Ladbrokes, Karen, as well. We knew exactly. We had a model that predict based on day one deposits and play exactly what to do. Whether they were bigger winners or whether they were bigger losers, that wasn't the objective. Was just to keep them playing. And we could segment them on day one in terms of where to take them next.
Yes. So it wasn't just the people who took advantage of the offer around about the Grand National. It was more than that.
That drives, but again, it's a very throwaway one-off promotion, isn't it? That's the challenge.
Yeah, exactly. James, you want to come back in?
Yeah, thanks. So it's quite an interesting conversation because it's something I think we grapple with quite often, the sort of acquisition versus retention. And as I mentioned earlier, across the multiple businesses we have, our ideal customer does more than one thing, and that is the kind of person that we want. But the commercial pressures of selling a massive event like Festival of Speed often doesn't align with the kind of customer strategy. So if we want a particular customer, and yet we know frankly, we'd take anyone in for this event over here because it just has to sell. Often those two things don't align. And I think for us, the critical thing is that the data and insights team is the team feeding the kind of the what might happen. So a really good example would be Festival of Speed, which is the biggest thing we do. It's kind of the reverse of giving people an offer. For the last few thousand tickets, we only sold them to members. So you had to buy a membership in order to buy the last few thousand tickets, which commercially for us worked very well. But a year later, everyone was really surprised how our churn went up at the point of anniversary for all of those memberships, because we get a lot of people, it's a one and done. I came to Festival of Speed once and I'm done. So I don't have any long-term value. We force them down a route to buy a membership. That then has a bigger churn at that point next year, and we're all kind of scratching our heads. But at the top of the commercial pressure didn't align really with the kind of the customer strategy, if you like. So that's something that we grapple with quite often and can be quite challenging.
And it's making sure that you understand who came in on what offer, and if it is Festival of Speed and it was membership, then we know that they're probably susceptible. By the way, major art exhibitions or major art venues have the same sort of issue. So if you want to go and see something in particular, the only way to get to see it at the Courtauld, for example, if it's art, is buy a membership, so you can get in on the membership days. But it might be just because that's the thing that really interested you, or the Royal Academy, or so that will often be something because people have got a particular artist or exhibition that they wanted to go to, but they're not interested in continuing to being a member, and they get the same sort of fallout that you'd be looking at, saying, well, why haven't we got retention? Andy, Andy, you've had your hand up for a bit.
Yeah, I was gonna first of all just a point on the acquisition or the paid and owned media, if you like. So for me, I think the CRM guys have become the paid media guys' best friend, because they've got access to data, they know how to use it, and they can help refine what they're doing and improve their metrics. So I think that convergence will only get more, get closer and closer together. I wonder if at some point, those two roles kind of come together and you don't have that paid and owned media kind of distinction in the future. But we'll have to see. But certainly from a customer contact strategy perspective, if I haven't got their consent or they're not coming into my digital estate, that's when I should be using paid media to kind of acquire and fill the funnel, right? And so the two can start working a lot closer together in terms of optimizing contact strategy and channels. That's the way I kind of think about it. So they all become buddies, closer buddies as we go. The other thing is, so bearing in mind those are converging, I just wonder with the sort of kind of onset of AI and everyone getting closer to data, that the operating model changes and roles start to change. So, suddenly a marketeer isn't a specialist in a certain silo. They need to be sort of data experts. They can get their heads around analytics. They know MarTech. They know sort of all the channels, and they so it become multifaceted. And I wondered if that was a sort of theme, or if people saw that coming as well.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, Andy. I mean, I spoke about my privilege of having trained with technical skills, but seeing that AI will flatten that, and you've quite rightly projected that onto the wider team, and you could do it onto wider business roles generally, couldn't you? The accountants and the lawyers have already seen the impact of AI on, can I merge this version of this agreement with that version, and I don't need to pay a lawyer to do it. So, but let's look on the positive side of that, grasping the concepts of first-party data, understanding the value of your first-party data, using whatever the very best techniques and tools are at our disposal to use it. That's the role. That's where you bring value for your organization. If you understand the concepts of the customer, the concepts of the marketing, then the AI is just helping you do that more efficiently. And boy, we're going to need that. We're going to have so much data, so many activities, so much personalization, so much continuous campaigning, so many people on their individual journey with the brand and with the organization. We need everything, absolutely everything, to make it work. So yes, it sounds like some of the specialisms will change, but I bet we find that there are still roles, as I joked earlier, prompt engineering. You'll see people now being recruited into roles to do prompt engineering for AI. Who saw that coming 5 years ago?
Yeah. But that data foundation, that is critical for all this. Otherwise, everything is sort of is suboptimal, right? Yeah.
And we will move slightly back from the data. You're not going to need to pore over spreadsheets in the way we might have done in the past. You'll be using tools to understand, to gain the insight from it.
Right, Graham,
sorry.
Yeah, Graham, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's absolutely right in terms of the way that things are probably going to go. And I think back to the points earlier on about data quality and all of those kind of bits and pieces I think what AI drives is an even stronger need for ownership, and ownership of particular types of data, and who's actually going to be responsible and accountable for making sure that that is suitable to feed all of these engines and AI and everything else. I mean, we've set up, much like probably a lot of your organizations, more of a domain structure whereby different parts of the business are the experts and own their data, and then we've set up a sharing platform in between where kind of known terms, I mean, it's all the old stuff, when we're using terms, are we using the same terms? Are we using the same definitions? Do we understand what we're looking at? Does AI interpret that in the way that we expect it to? All of those different kind of fundamental basics are critical to get any of this to work.
Yeah.
Very nicely put. Yeah, well done.
Robbie, you've still got your hand up.
I shouldn't have. It should. How do I take it off? Master data, but can't take the hand down. Amazing.
By the way, Andy, I was quite interested there and I don't know, Robbie, I'm worried if I press anything here, you'll suddenly evaporate from the screen.
Yes.
So I'll leave it. Andy, I'm quite interested. You mentioned there about between paid and CRM being buddies.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've always, in the education work I've done with the IDM over many years, is telling people you need buddies around the organization. You need somebody who works in the contact center. You need somebody who's not the FD, but he works close to the FD. You need somebody in HR to know who you're recruiting. There's people actually have got common interest with you. And I'm interested about this paid and CRM coming together. And I suppose I'll ask the question for the rest of you. You know, is that something that you've recognized in your business, or you see happening, or people don't talk to each other, or it's somewhere in between?
No. Shall I have because I'm, the majority of my career has been client side. It's only in the last couple of years I've come to this very dark side of B2B2C. So in my experience, you always they were very, very siloed, right? And they had their own agendas, and the performance marketeers, I think it's all performance marketing, but the paid media guys were, they had massive budgets. Their measurement frameworks were a bit sus, and that was always a bit of a resentment from the CRM team, and they weren't very data driven, right?
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, you had the CRM team, the own media team, who are measuring everything incrementally with control cells, much smaller budgets, really being kind of dragged over the coals in terms of, is it working? Is it working? Is it working? But then that same sort of approach wasn't kind of pointed at the paid media guys. But as soon as there started to be some list sharing, suddenly, we can make it a lot more powerful, right? And back to that point about contact strategy, we're all probably targeting the same people, and that stop list is crucial, and bringing the contact strategies together so that they are just channels is for getting to customer is probably the best way to start thinking about it, in my view.
Yeah. By the way, folks, we're coming to 10:20, so we've got about 10 minutes left. We've had one or two who've had to dip out. I didn't. I saw some tree surgeons in my garden, so I'm hoping they're chopping down the right tree. I will check out in a moment.
Toby Carvery and oak trees comes to mind.
Well, yeah, yes, indeed. Which was anyway. I won't go take us down that rabbit hole because I've got a view on that as well. Is there anything coming right back to the role of whether it's anonymous data or first data generally, or how to help that impact positively for your organization? Are there any thoughts at the moment that you're thinking, I wish we did more of this, and I wish that we could address this particular issue? Anybody want to jump in with that?
I'll jump in. I mean, we are certainly always trying to practice what we preach. Mel and I work on, our regular communications, trying to drive more personalization all the time. It takes work. We have several recurring activities. We have the notifications and updates we supply to our marketplace. We have briefings, we have events, we have different types of relations. All of those, we're trying to drive more personalization and trying to make sure the data is there to drive the channels. The other thing, incidentally, just Karen joked about having other people who look after it for her, but we have I think once a fortnight GDPR session, and I didn't step in at the time, but I would say the reason none of us are doing it 100% correct, as Craig alluded to, is it doesn't stand still. Your compliance and privacy challenges change as the business and as the organization evolves, as the things that we're trying to do evolve. So I don't think it is something we can tick the box and say we're there. It will need constant work to keep us moving forward. Karen.
Yeah, it's a bit of a build on that point, actually. But one of the things you said earlier, and learning that I do need to interact more with that team that look after privacy, etc., is I know that we have people who are looking at the use of ChatGPT, etc., and other AI tools. I just thought it was a really interesting point you made, which was, where is your data going? With that, and so I do need to connect with that team internally just so I understand if I'm using it, where is it going? I'm sure they've covered it, but it isn't something that I think we've kind of widely understood in the club. And I think it's fascinating what's happening now. Loved your comment as well, that to consider AI like the intern who's young, enthusiastic and learning, but still making mistakes. I thought that was brilliant.
But, it's not original from me, Karen, but it does seem to characterise it. One thing that I've seen, we've had our first legal agreement come through, and actually I think it was a confidentiality agreement, but which claims ownership of the output of the AI of that organisation. So, we're all used to the fact that confidential materials are anything we supply you, anything this, but in their case, they have now got into their legal body the concepts of the results of their Gen AI. And it's the first time I've seen it, and that was a couple of months ago. I guess we will start seeing a contractual representation of the activities that we're all aspiring to actually coming into our organisation. Do we protect what is done with our Gen AI in the same way as we protect the intellectual property we generate in other ways? I don't know if it was a Gen AI that wrote that contract. Maybe it was. I did a post a while ago on LinkedIn about human created content and how you can tag content to show that you've cared. You've taken the time to write this email, to write this content, personalizing it for people. And, there's a societal challenge on what's acceptable, what's going to be expected. And any new technology, of course, it will bring challenges, but let's go for those with the first party data at our side. Let's do it well. And the people you're talking with today can shape that industry over the coming years. And as a group, okay, there's only 20 of us or whatever, but it takes people to think about it and do stuff to really move the equation forward. And as you start sharing with your peers and your teams, you will find ways that first party data and the changes in structure, and I thought Robbie's comment was great. Bring together the data activities and marketing activities at the lowest possible level in your organization, so they are one thing. That's it. Let's do it together well. We can do that. So great, Martin, thank you very much for the session.
Melanie.
Yeah, no, I was just interested in some of the comments about, you get really focused on an event, for example, and then everything's all about acquisition. And it just struck me that, that's going to happen, and we shouldn't beat ourselves up about that. There are always going to be things that come along where, it maybe doesn't perfectly align with the strategy. And for that amount of time, it's all about that. But if you can just continually look at your first party data in the background, look at retention, you can then balance it back out when the time's right, and just keep trying to highlight the insights that you find and those valuable bits of information just to rebalance. So yeah, I just thought, don't beat ourselves up too much. As long as we keep going back to that data and keep trying to bring it in, that's a good thing.
I like the phrase you guys use at Apteco, which is that first party data is your organizational memory. And effectively, most people on this call are custodians of that organisational memory, sometimes recognised and sometimes not. And I'd be interested about how, just as we wrap up the session, if people are feeling, as a result of today, feeling a bit more enthused about being that custodian, or how you might go about that. Because in the end, it can either be this person's been appointed custodian of the organisational memory and everything customer. But actually, the way it normally works is people start to work out that actually Melanie's a really good person to go and ask some questions, because she's given me some insight which enables me to do my job better. And that's almost a word of mouth within an organisation if they haven't got this is how we're going to do things. I mean, how do people feel about that, and successes you might have had with that type of approach?
The CRM teams are the go-to, right? So if a project needs to get communication out the door, or if there is a JFDI from above, or somebody wants to send a research survey to somebody, it always comes back to the CRM team, and that's why their schedule is creaking at the seams.
Yeah,
they've got their discretionary marketing that they want to do to power the customer strategy, but they've got all this other stuff around the outside hitting them. And I think people know they're the custodian, but they don't get the credit.
No, I think you're right. Right, we're coming up to 10:30, folks. So I can't see any other hands raised. So whilst we're talking of hands, I think we should just put ours together for a fascinating session by James.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thanks, James. Really
Thank you, James. A great session. Thank you, everyone, for coming as well. Before, I know people have to drop off. If you're not following us on LinkedIn, do, because our next session probably won't be too far behind. We're in quite high demand. It's the best way to find out about what's coming up. And even if you don't enjoy the session, you do get your free box, which is always useful. But thank you all for coming. We get a lot from these sessions. I hope you did too.